morning, Cibolo Valley. I'll tell you probably a little more about the story of Jonah, what it means and what it could mean than you've heard before. There's a lot of lessons to be learned out of it. There's a great debate about whether there actually was a big fish that swallowed him and whether story is real history or just allegory. But we know from it that you can't run from God. And God will not be thwarted by us. You may remember that during the story, he tried to run from God and tried to not go to preach in Nineveh. God will not be thwarted. We also learned that God uses people who are very flawed and many times with terrible attitudes, which Jonah had. Now, Jonah's 3 days in the fish, he might have been dead, and then brought back to life. This would be a true picture of what Christ would do in Matthew 12:40, and that may be the reason why it was stated in Matthew 12:40 that Christ was a full 3 days in the earth, just like Noah was 3 days in the fish. Surely God does work in mysterious ways. Jonah hated the Ninevites. This was the chief city of the Assyrian Empire. They did great atrocities. They would capture people and impale them and flay them. Now, we do learn from this that we need, from this whole story and how Jonah reacted, that we need to set aside our human biases, hate, and lust for revenge, and care for sinners as God does. For us today, this would mean even having a burden for Hamas or Iran or Russia or China. It's important for our own growth and peace of mind rather than to let that lust for revenge or hate keep inside us. Afterward, when Nineveh had turned to God after Jonah's preaching, God gave him a plant for shade, but then it withered due to his hate. God lectured him for having more care for the plant than the people. Now, creationists usually try to show how each Bible account is possible. When the word whale is used by people in the King James Version, they actually were repeating out of the Greek Septuagint where it said seet or C-E-T-E, which would mean whale. Now, Matthew 12:40, the Greek there, when it talk about Jonah's big fish, was sea monster. Could have been a plesiosaur, a type of dinosaur. But in Jonah 1:17, the best Hebrew interpretation is big fish. Now, that could still be true and be a whale, because by our modern interpretations, a whale is a type of mammal. But the Bible was written far before Carl Linnaeus in the 1700s came up for our classification system of animals and fish and all of that. So the traditional whale could be true, but there's no current whale who could do the whole job. Now, a sperm whale, known for swallowing huge squid whole and vomiting huge amounts of blubber, that would fit into what we see in Jonah 2:5 through 6, where it says he went to the roots of the mountains, which would mean he went very deep in the sea. But he would not survive 3 days in his stomach. That may bring us back to that idea that he actually was carried in the whale, he died in the whale, but then he was resurrected when he was spit out. Now, some of this gets into fairy tales. There's been, Pinocchio had an analogous story. But again, you couldn't survive in the mouth of even a sperm whale or the stomach of a sperm whale. You would have to have a separate stomach that was just kind of a holding area like a cow has and some other mammals have. But still, those are full of gases and chemicals to break things down, so you couldn't survive there. There's fossilized extinct fish such as the megalodon who were big enough but again, there's no second holding chamber. Jonah 2:2 says, out of the belly of Sheol, out of the ground, out of possibly hell. That was Sheol was the Old Testament name for such. And Jonah 2:6 says his life was brought up from the pit, which again means he could have been in the earth, dead, and then resurrected. This says that it could have been a whale or megalodon with God supernaturally protecting him in the stomach or bringing him back to life. Or God could have designed just for this purpose a fish with a non-lethal cavity. Either way, this would be a miracle from God. Yet another lesson from God in this story is don't limit God as to what he can do. Jonah thought there was no way God could get him to Nineveh. Wrong. Likewise, we do not need to limit God nor minimize his interest in us. That really is the wealth of things that we can learn from Jonah's story. Too often in creation science we say, well, we'll explain it. And we could have explained it with either him being dead in there or with a specially designed fish. But again, either way, it's a miracle from God. God wants to do great miracles in our lives if we'll have faith and we'll just pay attention to him. And we're out.